So in these last talks, Baba is coming back to a central focus again on prana and akash, right? We've had it throughout, but he's really focusing on this in a very primary way. And also, we're coming back to the whole metaphoric system relating to the ocean, and he'll develop this a lot more. But now he's going to talk a lot about the ocean, the wave, bubbles especially, and the flow of pran. By the way, I forget if I properly mentioned this before. It doesn't come up here, but it's relevant. You know the waveform, right? You know the waveform, how it gets represented. Baba indicated that the crest of the wave is pran, and the trough is akash. I mean, I think that's an astonishing revelation there, because when pran and akash clash, right, it creates a wave, and you have both of them there, the pran and the akash. That primordial form that's at the root of sound, at the root of light, at the root of kind of everything.
And you see the foam?
And yeah, no,
Well, it makes me, I mean, a wave is actually like the golden ratio. It's a Nachi sequence, which is like, you can find that spiral in nature, you can find it in DNA. I mean, so this wave is everywhere.
yeah, actually, previous years when I was talking about the circle of the avatar, there's a beautiful thing on the internet that would show how when it creates a waveform. A point on the circumference creates a waveform. I can't do it properly, but it makes me think how the circle of the avatar, the Sadguru, would create waveforms and scaras from the cycling around. So that, anyway, there's much more to say about waves. But this prana and akash business is new, so far as I know, about its relation to the waveform. Well, here, Baba starts by talking, about the 7 states of a wave.
I'm curious what your footnote is there, number 1.
That's actually an end note.
Oh, yeah.
And the end notes are all textual,
Okay.
about textual issues.
Okay.
Yeah. So before finishing with this analogy and topic illuminates, today let us comment on energy and its 7 divisions. You remember that?
Yeah.
So now he's going to explain this more. Since without this our explanation will not have filled in its missing link, the matter of 7 forms, 7 planes, 7 skies, 7 anands, and so forth. Remember that? We read that this morning. Having been attended to. Energy is connected with all of these groups of 7 except for the 7 stations or planes, the 7 states, and the 7 anands. As an approach to the understanding of energy, let us begin with movement. So now he's going to explain movement in its relation to waves. Movement has 7 states. How so? Let us analyze movement by using the idea of a wave. A wave's 7 states are these: 3 states of rising, 3 of falling, and 1 in a momentary steady state. And what we took that to mean was at the crest, actually. There's a pause there before it falls. 7, and this is going to be related to the 7 skies, as you're going to see. And I'll just start by saying, in the course of this, Baba, you know how the drop is actually one with the ocean, right? Well, it seems that he's using the wave as one with the ocean also. But what is not one with the ocean is the movement. So what a wave is a portion of the ocean moving. The movement is illusory, but the wave is real, if you follow that. So the movement seems to correspond to pran. You remember, prana and akash both belong to the illusory. They are not real. So it's the prana that creates the appearance of movement in the wave, but the wave itself is real, apparently. So, okay, he says more about the sevenness of all of this. There's a lot, oops. Oh gosh, the entire inner world collapsed.
Yeah.
We've only got the gross
There
sphere.
were too many waves of wind.
Too many waves in the wind, I know, there's got to be a way of hooking it. Let's see. Okay, so here's where he says this. But remember, the wave itself is not a movement. The wave is the ocean when moving, right? So the wave is actually one with the ocean, but when moving it becomes a wave, right? So the wave seems to correspond to the reality, but the movement is not. I don't know if you're following this. Remember, prana and akash are both illusory. So when prana is added to the ocean, you get waves. Now, these seven states are so we've established this. The seven states in the wave are due to the seven states of energy, which results from movement. So seven states of energy is prana, right? So you have the seven states of prana creating the shape of the wave. But the wave itself is actually the ocean, whereas the movement is not.
But I thought wave is real.
Yeah.
But the seven states are prana, which is illusory.
Yeah, so it's like the illusory creates the appearance of a wave, the waveness. The wave is real, but the movement of the wave.
So the appearance,
the ocean.
I think the key word is appearance.
Yeah.
The wave is part of the ocean. It's intent. I mean, there's no wave ocean. The water is there.
Right.
So the movement is illusory,
Right.
and it makes that wave.
Right. The reality of the wave is one with the ocean, but the movement of the wave is the prana, which is illusory. So that's a critical distinction here. We actually did get from somebody, this would be Christina, as a matter of fact, give an interesting thing about, actually when they study waves, the water hardly moves at all.
Yes, that's right.
Just a tiny bit. Whereas the wave, look at a tsunami, what it does. So the actual water is not itself moving. So that analogy seems to work here. The ocean is the ocean, and the wave is an illusory movement within the ocean there. So this is getting to the division of energy into 7 parts. Remember this morning we had that. Let me just show you again that image of the, I showed it one time. We sort of skipped it when we were there, but we came back to it. It's this one. This is the creation of the gross and subtle sphere out of God. So coming right to the central one. Here's God, right? Here's the creator point. Here's the gross sphere, right? And here is the subtle sphere. Subtle again, right? First to sixth plane, the whole thing. Divided into 7 parts there. So now Baba is going to go into how that happens. How the wave has these 7 parts. 3 of rising, a stationary crest, and 3 of falling. And Baba gave this analogy, we went over earlier. This is the snake when it was lying asleep. But Baba said when the snake wakes up, it forms itself into 7 coils all at once. Not one after another, but all 7 appear simultaneously. So this is the same topic of the division of movement and energy into 7 parts, which he's going into at this series of talks here.
So, Ward, in that figure that you were showing us, looks like it says one of the gross walls. That outer, that outer.
This outer ring is the gross.
Ring is actually it's actually surrounding the subtle world.
Well, in this diagram, it's shown that way.
Uh-huh.
Anyway. Yeah, so remember, do you remember what the gross world corresponds to?
Yes,
Akash,
Akash,
right?
Adonis.
And we had earlier where the Akash, the gross divides into 7 parts. But what Baba usually says about it is that the gross does not subdivide, it's single. That's his usual account. Whereas the subtle does divide into 7. So this diagram shows that.
It makes sense for energy to be subdivided into
Yeah.
7, whereas...
So here is this, this image. You have it over here. With the wind went and blew over. Wind was trying to create bubbles. But the wind needs to hold off because bubbles don't come until here. So I jumped the gun. Much too early. Okay, so now what this is showing is the movement of pran down from the 7th plane, the 7th asman. I think probably planes are just as good here, down to the gross sphere. And it's only in the gross sphere where Akash comes into the story. It's only pran before that. So the inner world is made up of pran. And when it hits the gross sphere, you get bubbles. That's where the first bubbles come into the story. And here, Darya, or ocean, so this is summarizing from what is said in these 2 lectures. First stage, okay, at the beginning, if I do here, I get out of the camera vision, is that right? Okay, Baba, at the beginning, the energy or the pran is most powerful but never used. Because in the 7th plane, what's there to use it for? Your God. He said in the 6th plane, it's, so the first stage corresponds to the 7th sky or asman. So these are stages in the descent of pran. It's like pran is like water flowing down from a high place down to its merging in the ocean where it forms bubbles, or merging to where it forms bubbles at the bottom. Okay, so here's the ocean actually. So the 2nd stage would correspond to the 6th sky. And here, one single field of calm energy, vast and undivided. That's what pran is at that stage. Pran is there, you know, but it's indifferentiable. The 3rd stage, which is like the 5th sky, right, is energy begins to vibrate. Here is where vibration, primal vibration occurs.
What causes that vibration to happen?
Baba doesn't really say. And Baba does say this in his discussion of these. We're just looking at the diagram, so remember there's a... by the way, this diagram also, there is a space for a diagram left on the page, but it was never filled in. So Nadia and I just came up, this took a huge amount of work, just as best we could to try to illustrate what Baba talks about. So there's no guarantee that this diagram is, you know, what Baba would have wanted. Although I will say this, all this verbiage and all this description is taken right from the lectures themselves. So Baba does say on the 5th plane, on the 5th asman, that the power is very powerful, but it's unused and unexpressed. And he says this, and he has said this nowhere else that I know of, that someone in that state actually could use the power. They could do miracles. Elsewhere, Baba has said that they couldn't. But I think this is probably a more accurate and penetrating account of this. He says that on the 5th asman, the arif who is there, the wali who is there, the saint, knows that that power is there, but it will accomplish nothing in the attainment of God. It's useless for that. So they never use it. And Baba said, it has never happened once. Because they just know as a certainty it's of no use in what they're trying to achieve. But they could, but they never do. That's what he says there.
Unless, the avatar has work for them to do something, right?
But it doesn't sound like he would be asking them to do it, I don't think. He'd probably have someone on the fourth plane to do it. Because he says it's never happened, that they've used it. Yeah. Elsewhere, it seems that people on the fifth plane can get miracles done. They just order an underling, a fourth planer. Hey, go do a miracle. Yes, sir. Right. So they're kind of beyond that level there. But this is an interesting explanation. They have power, actually, but they simply don't use it. But in the fourth sky or asman, this is the fourth stage of the descent, energy swells to its highest level. So we showed that here. So these are 3 stages of rising. Now, the power was there from the beginning, but it was unexpressed for the reasons I've just said, because there's no use for it. But on the fourth plane, it can be used, and thus the force is reached its highest point. Fourth plane, right? So this is part of the descent of Pran, where now power comes into use. Okay, highest level of force, and the vibration breaks into 7 divisions, siddhis. So here is where the breaking into 7 divisions happens, right there, at that point, seventh plane. So remember Baba was saying the sevenfold division of energy is at the root of all these other 7s. We had that earlier today. So this seems to be where that happened. Now, after this, Pran, so we're having something like the flow, it's an analogy of the flow of water from a high place. Have you ever heard this before, you guys? I mean, this is completely new, right? I mean, have you ever seen a description of the inner worlds like this?
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a description from the standpoint of pilgrims at all. It's almost like a pure look of the primordial principles and how they create this inner landscape. So at the fourth plane, this is the 5th stage, or the 3rd sky, actually. Pran goes over a waterfall, and Baba uses that analogy for it. You may remember from earlier that the 3rd sky has 3 subdivisions. Remember that? Like Indrapad, or the Alam-e Huri, like that, of realm of the Huris, and so forth. Antargyan is the 3rd of them, the highest actually. So he talks about 3 stages here. At first, the flow is steady, then it breaks into a storm, and at the bottom it explodes into drops. So when I think about a waterfall, at the very beginning of the lip of it, it's kind of steady, it's smooth as it goes over the lip, right? You guys have seen that. But then there's a free fall, where it's a big storm, and at the bottom, explodes into drops. So apparently the 3 stages of the 3rd asman are like that. So when you're looking earlier about part A, part B, part C, it all sounds very tame. But you can see from this that it's not tame at all, And Baba doesn't talk about the standpoint of a pilgrim, but you got to go up through this. Like a trout going up a waterfall. It's a job, it's hard. And Baba says about the one on the 4th asman, he doesn't see the waterfall behind him. And it evokes the image to me of someone standing at the head of the waterfall, maybe in a pool, and there's this big waterfall behind, and he doesn't know that. So you're in great danger. You know, you can fall down like that. And in the, I'm actually giving you a much sanitized account of this. When you read the lectures yourself, there are all these very strange things in it, actually. In the 6th stage, which is the second Asman, drops appear. And he says that it's at this juncture that subtle forms arise. Before that, there were not subtle forms. Now that's really kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, I would have thought there'd be subtle forms all the way through the subtle planes. But nope, apparently they arise here.
But were there any form there? Maybe it wasn't subtle form, but were there any form or they were formless?
Well, what would they be?
Yeah, God knows.
You know, beyond. There's really a lot here to study and puzzle over. Let me also say that these particular lectures, there are a lot of textual issues too. So sometimes I had to write a sentence in just a completely ambiguous way because I didn't feel confident enough to determine certain points. You've got to have evidence to do that. So if you really want to get into this, you actually need to read the endnotes to tell the truth, which are really tough. There's no way around it. And when it reaches the 7th stage, first plane, now you're at the boundaries of the gross sphere, right? Here is where bubbles appear. So there are no bubbles before this. Bubbles are associated with the gross, the meeting of the gross and the subtle, right? And I've had this thought too. Baba didn't say this, but thinking about the form of a bubble. A bubble is like the surface is the water, right? Like the pran, in pran akash. And what's in the center is emptiness, pran and akash. And Farhad Shafa has been bringing up a perspective of holographs and stuff, and I was just listening to a video where they're speculating now that the whole universe is a three-dimensional projection of an informational base that is two-dimensional, that's on the surface of things. Well, that's kind of like a bubble, isn't it? The surface is the pran, and what's contained within is the akash. And when they unite, you get the appearance of a reality. Anyway, it's just an idea that...
When you say they unite, they don't clash, they unite?
Well, you know, he always says clash. Well, he had a nice clash here when the waterfall.
Yeah, that's what I
Hit the
thought.
bottom.
At least this figure actually shows it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right here.
Right. So, again, I read in various places, Baba said, there is no space in the subtle sphere. For years I've been reading that in different places, and I kept thinking, Baba, that can't be right. There's got to be extension in the subtle sphere as much as the gross. But apparently he means this, akash. Akash comes into the picture only when you get to the gross level of things. So you see how this prana and akash is really being used as a very powerful part of Baba's cosmological account. Enormous. The God Speaks mentions it not once, but here it is. And, okay, since you've had all the ordinary stuff which you already knew, should we look at some odd things? Some information?
That wasn't all. That wasn't all.
Yeah. I know, everyone's going to slave. I know all this already. Is this where it is? Let's see. Okay, I don't know if it's possible to explain this in the time we have, but he says, remember movement, pran, and the hollow Hokol, right? You know those two, are not themselves the ocean, but they are in the ocean. Pran and Akash belong to the imagination. They are not real. Whereas the wave and the drop are real. So keep this in mind, and I repeat, the ocean is in the state of movement and hollow, and the movement and hollow are in the ocean, but the movement and hollow are not the ocean, right? You get
It's
the
almost
distinction?
like nothing and everything.
Yeah, I mean, movement and,
Isn't
yeah.
it not nothing part of everything?
Yeah, but these are, movement and hollow are the imagination, they're non-existent. So they're not the ocean itself, which is the reality of things. The movement creates a bubble in the hollow, right? The moving wave is called Ishwar, and this is what I think is a bit mind-blowing. For anybody who's read Infinite Intelligence and read parts, okay, I'll just flip this out here. This is a bigger idea than can be explained here, but there are a lot of, Baba said earlier, I think I did read it, The Secret, remember, that each individual human being is the universe? Yep. Well, this makes me think that this is the universe of an individuality. And there is an Ishwar for each one of us. There is a universal aspect of divinity relevant to each one of us as a single wave. And Baba says, take one of these waves and drops at the end of the seventh stage, and here at last we find the Jivs. The Jiva of Atma happens only when Pranakash create bubbles, right? That's where that happens. It hadn't happened earlier. As long as there is a Jiv, that Jiv has Ishwar, or God. When in the end, Jiv becomes Shiv, the Jiv, Ishwar, and the bubble all vanish. So we would have to spend a week on this, but I think this is a tremendously significant passage, actually. Yeah,
I almost think he's going from microcosm to macrocosm.
totally.
And I think he's pretty much trying to say how we become one with him.
I couldn't hear the last part.
How we become one with him.
Yeah.
From an individual to a collective.
That's right.
That's how I envisioned it when you read it.
Yeah, no, I agree. The wave is like the macrocosm version. And so when the Jiv, the drop and its bubble, eventually merge with the reality of God, the macrocosm disappears also.
Right.
Thus, Ishwar vanishes. This is what I think this provides a key to. When we had sessions on infinite intelligence, there were many sections. All right, there's one section noteworthy, that's noteworthy in this way, where when a rock wakes up, Brahma creates, I'll say, the gross universe, I'll skip subtle, and Vishnu preserves the subtle universe. And then the rock becomes conscious of the universe and has its daytime experience. If you didn't know that rocks wake and sleep, they do, apparently. And then when Shiva destroys the gross universe, the rock goes back to sleep. Okay, that's infinite intelligence. There's a lot on it. But the obvious question is, if Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh are doing this all for this rock, how about everybody else? Does their whole universe get created and preserved and destroyed? It's like this damn rock keeps destroying my universe anytime I try to do, because it went back to sleep again, right? What about everybody else? And I could give you a whole list. The very final message in Stay with God given by Baba has this idea too, where Baba says, this whole universe exists just for you, right?
Yes.
Well then, how about everybody else? You know, it's like, it seems to justify a totally, you know the word solipsism? Where everything exists just for me. And there are several passages where Baba speaks in really solipsistic terms, like everything exists just for you. Well, aren't I supposed to be thinking about other people? Isn't that love? How about selfless service? Why should I be selflessly serving if everything exists just for me? Well, it seems that there is a universality to every individual because every individual is God. And there is a universal Ishwar and a universal wave for every individual. And when you realize God, the whole universe does too. That seems to me to be, this really is the key to solving a huge problem in Meher Baba's metaphysics, I think, anyway. And this is the first time I've seen anything like this. I mean, do you agree this is really a major passage, actually?
Actually, the end of it, I couldn't understand. When in the end, Jeev becomes Shiv, we got to what Shiv is. The Jeev, Ishwar and the bubble all vanish.
Yeah.
They all vanish?
Yeah, everything's gone. Because you merged in God.
I think it's in the language of God
you
speaks
become one.
that the Jivatma is the individual soul in illusion, and the Shivatma is the God.
Ishwar worshipped?
Huh?
Is Ishwar worshipped?
Ishwar is that aspect of God, the creator, preserver, and destroyer. You could say the personalized aspect of God. God, you know, like who creates, preserves, and destroys everything, who answers prayers, who is infinitely knowing about you and everything about you, as opposed to impersonal God who's beyond it all. This is where infinite intelligence and this book need to be studied together, because infinite intelligence is the definitive book on this.
So the image that helps me with this is...
A little louder.
The image that helps me with this is the idea, if you take a drop out of the ocean and it goes through this cycle of being a drop,
Yeah,
when you return it to the ocean, it's just ocean.
yeah, that's right.
It loses its sense of being away from the ocean,
Right.
and you cannot distinguish it as the observer.
Yeah, that's right. And we had that waveness. Well, the drop has been in relation to a wave. Like we are in relation to planet Earth, right? Remember that the planet Earth is a wave bubble, actually. And when we merge into the totality of the ocean, so does the wave. It's gone too. So the macrocosm is another huge principle in Meher Baba's Darshana. We haven't talked about it here because Infinite Intelligence and God Speaks would be the right books to discuss that subject in, but it is major part of it. But here it comes up. I think of the wave, did you say it here where Ishwar? Yeah, the moving wave is called Ishwar, right? You get that? Ishwar is not the movement, and Ishwar is not the ocean. Ishwar, the wave is the ocean. Ishwar is the wave when it's moving. So it's that aspect of God that exists in relationship to creation. Personalized God in that sense. Not transcendent God who has nothing to do with it. That aspect of God that is in continuous relationship. Baba says about Ishwar, Ishwar doesn't have the I am God experience. Ishwar doesn't know the I am God thing. But Ishwar is God and is continuously attentive to the created world. I hope everybody, I don't want to lose everybody on this one. But
It's just a verb.
it's a wild revelation that's
It's
happening.
the action.
Huh?
Isn't Ishwar just the action?
Ishwar is God.
Ishwar is the aspect of God, is a God.
It's a
personification.
God.
You could say
But it's a
personal God.
movement. I mean,
The personal
it's a
aspect of
moving
God.
way he's called it. So
I mean, I'll say it again. We'll need to have future programs where we study infinite intelligence also. That's really the book on Ishwar.
that would be
But
nice.
Ishwar doesn't have any purpose
No,
once the Shiv is
right.
realized.
The Jeev becomes Shiv.
Yeah, then Ishwar doesn't matter. And
Right.
And that's the
like,
whole purpose.
So Ishwar
who needs
disappears.
Ishwar? You know?
Right,
That's the whole purpose.
right, the purpose.
Who
So
needs it? And all of the other people and all those other things, they're all gone.
they're all gone, yeah.
It's just one.
But while we are active, this is the interesting thing to me about Ishwar, while we are actively pursuing our goal,
Yeah.
unrealized, Baba calls Ishwar, poor fellow.
Yeah, poor fellow.
He doesn't know either one.
Because of what?
Poor fellow.
Poor fellow.
There is an occurrence. Ishwar, poor fellow. Bob is so funny. It's like the avataric perspective, poor fellow. He spends all his time fussing about us, you know.
Yeah. And this also sentence is one of the maybe masterpieces. Says, as long as there is a jiv, that jiv has Ishwar or God.
Yeah.
Nothing to be worried about.
Yeah.
Then
Then jiv becomes.
Izad is Ishwar.
What's that?
Izad is Ishwar.
The only one
Is that the name of God?
Izad?
Yeah,
I don't know enough about Izad to say.
Izad, the only one worthy of
You're
worship.
named Izad, the only one. I don't know
Okay.
about that name of God and what all its implications are. Ishwar is not God. Actually, in God Speaks, Ishwar would correspond to the third state of God, if you happen to know that. Creator, Preserver, Destroyer. And in God Speaks, Baba says, the third state of God does not have the I am God knowledge. Ishwar doesn't know he's God, but in effect is God. But the reason the Ishwar doesn't have the I am God knowledge is the Ishwar is continuously attentive to the creation.
But what moves Ishwar? What causes him to attend to the creation?
Baba doesn't say, but it sure sounds pretty loving to me. That is, Ishwar is infinitely attentive. Okay, remember this is infinite intelligence, you know, again, we really have to read it. But Baba says, I always talk about the rock as Rocky. Little Rocky is going to wake up. So Ishwar creates the subtle sphere. Ishwar's Brahma creates the subtle sphere. Vishnu, as a preserver, preserves the subtle sphere, and then little Rocky starts to dream. Well, look at this. Almighty Ishwar is doing all of this for this little drop soul so that it can have experience. Isn't that the infinite, it's almost like the mother aspect of God?
Yeah.
Infinite mothering of every creature. And when it's time for Rocky to go to sleep, Ishwar, as Shiva, destroys this subtle sphere so that Rocky can go back to sleep. So there's this infinite attentiveness to every, we're talking about a rock, an electron. This happens for every one of them, all over the creation. Nobody has any right to say, I'm overworked, I work 24/7. The only one with the right to say that is Ishwar.
No time off.
But this gives a whole new, I suspected this all along, to tell the truth, but there's this passage that to me seals it, that there, let's say, there's Ishwar in a universal sense, but there seems to be an individualization of Ishwar for every single Jivatma in creation. And why would every single Jivatma in creation be worth it? Because every single Jivatma is no one less than Almighty God. Even an electron is nothing less than Almighty God and is deserving of everything. So this is a kind of a mind-blowing vision of things, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, if you ask, wasn't Baba a personal person? I mean, if you ask Mara or Mani or Eric, well, let's say the women,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be happy if it were possibly Baba Raj showed up there and said,
Right.
"Oh, I'm God, you don't have this relationship with me." I mean, isn't there an individual involved with, you know, God? I mean,
So the personalization of your relationship
it's
with
not
God,
just
yeah.
Ishwar, it's a real
Right.
individual that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, from the standpoint of the individual, Ishwar is indifferentiable from God. Even though Ishwar doesn't have the I am God experience. Actually, the Master is greater than Ishwar because the Master does have that. Is Ishwar plus God beyond. But Ishwar is, we could not tell the difference. Like if Ishwar showed up and we'd say, hey Ishi, are you God? And he would say, sure, of course I'm God. He might have the discursive intellectual knowledge of being God, but he has infinite knowledge but never looks at himself for one instant. That's the only reason for the not having I am God experience. In every other way, Ishwar is God. I mean,
Is he in a state of God or attribute?
well, I mean, in the 10 states of God, this is the third state of God. Okay, so I'm giving you one little snippet from these last 4 lectures, and look at what's in this one paragraph. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that in Buddhism, it says there are innumerable beings, and they do not obstruct one another. If you think of that, we do not obstruct one another. If there are all these Ishwars individually, and none of them obstructs the other,
right?
There has to be a unity that informs it all.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, so when you resolve that, the bubble vanishes by itself intellectually.
Yeah.
Hey, did you say individual Ishwars?
Yes.
Rather than just one big Ishwar helping us all out?
It's very much like a hologram.
So there's many Ishwars?
There's many Ishwars.
Or are each individuated?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think there would have to be innumerable Ishwars and one Ishwar at the same time.
So where does Maya fit with that? Is that part of Ishwar?
The what?
Maya.
That's a different thing. Maya is the principle of ignorance.
Yeah.
And it's that which causes us to take the imagination to be real. Ishwar is this infinite intelligence. We really need to study infinite intelligence. I keep saying it, but it's really true. This is where Baba really explains all of this. That's why it's such an important book. But Maya only comes in when the Jivatma mistakes the illusion for reality. So Ishwar is actually not a slave to that at all, because Ishwar never makes that mistake. It's just playing with nothing. We better not try to go too far with it, because our time is limited and we really need to read Infinite Intelligence. This is a place where those 2 books need to be brought into relation with each other.
You said there are many Ishwar, and then there Ishwar as a third state of God. So, is there one Ishwar per Jeev that later on becomes Shiv?
I mean, that's what we're saying. I mean, it's hard to read this sentence otherwise. As long as there is a Jeev, that Jeev has Ishwar or God.
Yeah.
When in the end Jeev becomes Shiv, the Jeev, Ishwar, and the bubble all vanish. It's hard to read that in any other way.
That probably that Ishwar that was individualized Jeev. But the real Ishwar as a third state of God is still there.
I think that this is the real Ishwar also.
Yeah, it's a moving wave. The wave is the ocean.
Yeah, it's the ocean.
And it says it's the real thing.
Yeah.
But it's made the movement to get us there.
Because the Jeev is actually the ocean too. This shows how, you might say, why is a stupid little Jeev, a stupid little me or you, worth the attention of Almighty God, right? Because we actually are Almighty God. The greatness of that Atma is beyond our imagining, so that the Ishwar himself, when we disappear, Ishwar himself disappears. Anyway, I think this is an amazing paragraph. And when I was trying to edit this, it's so difficult to edit this too, because the prose was quite dense. All of that.
What page is that?
I
So when
think
we
we
get
need
the
to
book,
go
we'll
read the
know.
Ishwar
Yeah,
again.
this is right near the end, 299,
Okay.
12th of January. Yeah, that's a kind of a astonishing place. Yeah, and I don't want to completely skip part 3, so I'll just say this about the very last one. There's a very strange passage, as opposed, again, to this very normal stuff, which you already knew, where Baba seems to say that at the moment of Mahapralaya, this seems to be almost more from the perspective of devas or devis or farishte, angels, or like that, than from the perspective of human. Don't you see what I mean? It's not from a humanized or pilgrim perspective at all. But these drops, these devas or devas, these spirits, you know, disembodied spirits like angels, have an instant, and it seems to say this, where the drop can become the ocean, and they can acquire an Atma and get God realized. This would seem to say that they don't have Atmas. Now, how the hell could they not have Atmas? It seems to say that.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is being left. Again, I think this, even the LA group will have a hard time with this one. But after you've solved the allegory, this could be the advanced course. By the way, in solving the allegory, you've got a 2-month advantage on the Myrtle Beach group, because they'll be getting this in October. So when they do it,
time to
you can solve, and you can say, you guys don't even understand that. Haven't you read any Baba books at all? Like that. Okay, this is a glimpse of some of these last 4 lectures, which really are quite remarkable, I find. But then, because of the darn Persians, Abdullah Pakrawan, you know, had to go up to the 6 planes, so Baba stopped talking. Yeah?
Maybe causing trouble. The fact that electricity is the 78th shadow of the powers of the yogis.
Yeah.
What?
That's interesting.
78th shadow of the powers? Like,
Yeah.
is this the cold stuff?
Yeah.
Am I poking a bear?
You know, a good book to go to on this would be Early Messages to the West. There's a chart there on it. But this, that sounds like it's it's talking about the relation between that level of power and power itself. When manifested grossly, the electron is gross manifestation, right? And that's just a remote shadow of real power. Now, why 78? See, I don't know. I said there's a numerological component, and that seems to be a significant number. Another significant number you'll encounter, we skipped over, is 106, turns out. So I don't altogether know the answer to that. But I would read Early Messages to the West. There's a section in it, How It All Happened, where Baba does give more on that. Okay. Now, okay.
That book is covers the area around 1934.
Baba gave that out in 1934. It got published
after this, yeah.
Yeah, it was after that.
After
Baba
that.
gave that. That's an important book. Okay, to say a tiny bit, I keep skipping these last 6 discourses because these 34 are really the dynamite, but these discourses are really of worth to it. I don't want to get the impression they're not. So this is, you can see the dates here, right? 28th November 1927, right? Actually, the stuff with the kids was starting to happen then, even in the end of November. And then we have...
So he was still talking.
This again, 25th November 1927. And this one on Hafez, Khwaja Hafez, 25th, 29th of November. The last of these is the 10th of December, where the talks with the boys had really started. So these are very interesting in their own right. I'm going to read a little snippet from here, from one place, maybe 2 places. I have time. Yeah, this one on Hazrat Babajan is really, really interesting. This information seems to come from Baba, who told the Mandali about this. But here's here's some stuff, Baba telling the Mandali about the education of children. And you can see how that would be relevant to the work he was doing at that time, right? The school was there. Childhood is the ideal period in life to take to spirituality. The impressions received at a young age get ingrained deeply. Children should always be impressed with the divine beauty, grandeur, and bliss, to such an extent as to fire their imagination about God and His greatness to the highest pitch. Their enthusiasm in this connection, however wild, should never be curbed. That's what happened with the Meher Ashram and Parama Ashram kids, right? It was out of control, but Baba let it happen. On the contrary, one should always make one's best attempts to create in these boys a deep-rooted longing for divine upliftment. Never mind if all the boys go mad with uncontrollable enthusiasm and unruly impulses on spiritual matters. The aim of this institution, the Hazrat Babajan High School, remember that had been created also at the same time as the Meher Ashram, is more to create divine MADs than university BAs. And MAs. Here, the former, here means here at Mirabad, the former are much preferred to the latter. For these same reasons, Sri Ramakrishna strongly advocated the instruction of children and young boys in divine subjects. Dhruv and Prahlad, these are famous figures from the Puranas. There's a note that tells you more about them. Very well known, really good examples of this. Largely owed their great spiritual development and divine upliftment to such training in their childhood. The training that boys receive at a young age becomes second nature to them. Not all of them can be expected to become Dhruvs and Prahlads. These are like really great figures, of course. But certainly, some of them will take to the spiritual line in the later period of their life. Isn't that interesting? Baba's realistic. When they become adults, they'll get into their lives, most of them, as most people do. But at the later period of their life, they're really likely to take to the spiritual line, while the rest will do so after a few lifetimes.
Oh.
Look at his vision of all of this.
If not sooner.
If not sooner. I mean, Baba, a Meher Ashram kid goes mad with love, goes off, lives his life. 3 lifetimes later, kaboom, goes up like a, well, Baba, 3 lifetimes? Sure. That's the natural term for this seed to come to fruition. He'll do that. No problem. You see the perspective of the avatar, the canvas, the extent of time he's working with. But in all cases, the present training will eventually fructify. Even temporary impulses and moments of enthusiasm about God realization produce their own result. Such early training and experience is like a cash balance to one's credit at the bank, which is surely to be utilized productively at some time or another in connection with one's spiritual advancement. Isn't that a lovely passage?
What can you say to that?
Yeah, and then he goes on to talk about impulses, and he means by this spiritual impulses, not, myopic impulses. Rarely do grown-ups get lasting enthusiasm or longing. At a fascinating discourse or logical discussion of the divine grandeur or spiritual bliss, certainly, even the grown-ups get fired with a longing to search after truth and fathom the secret of the universe. But unhappily, their ardor and enthusiasm do not last long. I mean, I see that in myself. It's like, you swore, you sluggard. The impulse of the moment rises and falls quickly in the absence of quick results. If, however, and then he goes on with this, but you can see this is really quite interesting. And he gives the example of St. Francis. And this is stuff that I haven't seen elsewhere. St. Francis of Assisi, who was the son of millionaire parents, got his imagination fired up once merely from reading the Holy Bible. "Leave all and follow me" were the words that made him, what's the word? Renounce the palatial and luxurious shelter of his rich parents one night silently when the rest of the inmates were sleeping. It was an impulse of the moment that set the brave lad, he's a brave lad, in search of Christ. But that impulse did not prove temporary. So it's almost like he caught a wave and never got off it. For 4 long years, he underwent untold and indescribable hardships. But after many adventures at home and abroad, he reached perfection. Not only did he attain God realization, but he became one of the few masters who, after the experience of truth, returned to the gross plane for the sake of humanity. And he became a perfect master. There's stuff on sanskaras. Again, some of this is really quite interesting. He says here, the material sanskaras, he talks about those. Spiritual sanskaras, however, fruit from one's own personal effort and suffering in connection with the search or longing for the truth, which is to say, God. These spiritual impressions go on accumulating until the time of God realization without any risk of their ever diminishing. Isn't that nice? I mean, most of our good and bad depressions we spend and they're gone. But these don't. They're permanent, it seems. They keep on increasing to the credit of such individuals who accrue them. But material impressions, whether good or bad, always have to be spent before you can reach the truth. So that's kind of nice to see. I haven't seen that anywhere else. Spiritual impressions are permanent asset in your journey to God. He also talks about, material sanskaras lead one to heaven or hell, depending on the quality of what predominates, good or bad. Bad sanskaras force one to undergo all the horrors of hell until they are spent off. And in just the same way, good impressions afford one the bliss of heaven as long as they still endure. Now this is new, I haven't seen this before. As a general rule, the pressure from the side of bad sanskaras weighs less heavily, since even the slightest accumulation of good sanskaras causes the bad ones to be spent up soon, with a short stay in hell before the good ones are enjoyed. That's kind of nice to hear, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I think an interesting point there is it sounds like you can experience both hell and heaven
Right.
after one lifetime.
It does sound like that.
Yeah.
Whereas I was kind of thinking otherwise from other things
Yeah,
Baba had said, but this seems clearly to imply that. So, you burn up your bad sanskaras quickly and then you have a heaven state experience. It sounds, I'm glad to hear it, actually. When you eat fresh food, the refuse in your system is forced out at the earliest possible time before the system begins assimilating the fresh consignment. In the same way, bad actions are spent up first, then the enjoyment begins. Consequently, after the death that follows a bad life, one takes a new body soon. But this too depends upon the particular nature of the sanskaras one has gathered. So that's all news. Yeah. So I guess you'd probably spend a long time in the heaven state if your sanskaras are predominantly good. Okay, so what should we say? You can see There's a lot in these 6 discourses too. I sort of skipped over them, but they really have a lot. So anyway, this is a picture of the late Mehrabad period. This is the last major body of discourse that we have from this time. In 1929, Baba really began doing other things, and this completes the publication. We had, In God's Hand, Infinite Intelligence, Tiffin Lectures, and this. And it's a major addition to, I call it the early Mehrabad dispensation. When I came to Baba, none of this was there. We had not the slightest idea that this was there. But it adds hugely to our picture and understanding of Meher Baba's darshan.
Ford, I'm taken with the first sentence in the last paragraph.
Yeah.
That a person can be dragged back onto earth with bad samskaras into animal form.
Yeah, I know.
I've never seen that before from Baba.
I've heard of that.
I thought it was always upward unless you get bounced back in the stomach.
What's the asterisk there?
Well, there is, I was going to put a section in the appendix of Tiffin Lectures on that, because there too, there are passages in the diary where Baba does say that.
Oh, okay.
So I know, I know that Dr. Ghani thought that even into the 1940s, that you can be reborn in animal form. But later on, Baba categorically denies it. So this is an interesting...
And Mani said several times that I heard, it's always onward and upward.
But that might be temporary.
She said you always take it from where you're living.
Yeah, well, I mean, Baba also said later years you can never revert, but in these earlier days he did sometimes indicate.
Maybe there is that turning of one one thing to another. So perhaps that's where it's going. I mean, if it goes to animal form, it's the last one that it's next to the human.
I think he means
that transition.
I think he means from a human form you get reborn as an animal.
Yeah.
He definitely.
What is the asterisk?
The last one.
Retarded on the gross plane asterisk.
That's my endnote on the matter. In his later discourses, I think this is as big as I can make it. Yeah, it is. In his later, did I lose the page?
Wrong page.
Yeah, you were there, it was on the right instead of the left. Yeah, on the right side instead of the left.
Oh, I was on the right side?
Yeah, it's on the right side.
Okay. Yeah. In his later discourses, Meher Baba said that the human form, once achieved, can never be lost except in the case of a fall from the 4th plane, and that retrograde incarnation is impossible. But in his lectures and discourses in the 1920s, he several times indicated that in the case of extreme bad actions, such as murder for the sake of lust, a person could subsequently incarnate in animal form. So that's there. There are statements like that.
So I really think, excuse me,
I'm sorry.
I really think that this is not saying that you revert or reverse back to a human form and have to come back from different animal forms.
Yeah.
I think it means one lifetime.
Yeah.
Where you work out all those bad sanskaras, you still have the human form in essence.
Yeah.
And then when you complete working out that load,
Right.
you return to a human form. You don't have to go through
Right.
being monkey, ape, so forth.
Right. That would be my guess too. Like really terrible sanskaras, so animal. Maybe some of these legends of werewolves, or there might be some reality to it, but it would be an exceptional case where you've got to work out these horrible impressions you acquired, and you have that life, and then you're back in your form. That would be my guess too.
It's an abuses animals.
It says animal form.
And they, that would be their karma, it would be an animal for one lifetime.
Yeah.
You get abused.
Right. That's a guess. But anyway, I was going to put this into Tiffin Lectures, and I said, no, it's going to be too controversial. But here it is. It's unavoidable. There are a bunch of passages for Chanji's diary where he
Maybe this
says
is
this.
called part of Baba's secretive language, you know. Sometimes he says things that might
Yeah.
be, who knows?
So,
Maybe he changed it.
Yeah. He changed the
I mean,
bylaw.
so like
That was
27,
true up
but by the
until the
30s, by
30s.
the 30s, that had gone away.
That's right.
In the 30s,
Okay.
40s, he decided, no more
A
anymore.
new law, a new divine law, no moving back. Well, thank you guys so much for